We will thrive.
Well, hi, everybody, and it's a real pleasure to join you. I'm actually joining you from the United States. I just heard you talking a bit about that, and from Chicago, Illinois, the Midwest in the United States. I hope that all of you are healthy and well and taking care of your families in the midst of all of this. Part of what I wanted to talk a bit about was my own journey. I am a proud father of three teenagers. But when they were small, and my youngest boy in particular, he and I had a ritual every morning. And one morning, he asked me a question that really caught me off guard. He said, "So, Daddy, when you were a little boy, did you have a daddy?" And I said, "No." And he's really confused by this answer. He says, "Well, a mommy?" And again, I said, "No." I had grown up in foster care and I had no memory of family. And so he was really asking me about where I had come from. And I did not realize as a young dad that when a child asks you a question and they don't fully understand your answer, they'll ask you another question and another question and another question, which is how I wound up writing a book about this. It's called The Chance in the World. And I got that title from the diary entry of a babysitter who met me at 1.5 years old. And he said, "The situation is too desperate. There's just no way that he's going to be able to overcome this. He doesn't have a chance in the world." Now, I didn't read that prediction until many, many years later, of course. And yet when I looked at it and when I saw it, actually, I smiled a bit because I thought, well, that's all that any of us really want, is just a chance in the world. This is actually the book that I wrote about it. And I was amazed by this kind of universal story about family and faith and fortitude and forgiveness that really does touch and impact all of our lives. Doesn't much matter who you are or where you've grown up. Those are universal themes, and so it is with me. But in the course of writing it, I wanted to talk more specifically about the people who had such a big impact on me. Remember, without having any family, I was really reliant on neighbors and on teachers. And there were three of these lighthouses in particular whose impact was extraordinary and continues. The first actually was a neighbor. I love to read, and I still love to read. And I had this kind neighbor one time who saw me reading the same book over and over again. And she brought me a box of books. And she did this for the 10 years that I was in this very, very cruel and abusive foster home. And she didn't really realize how important an effect and an impact that she was having on me, much like many of you listening and don't always really fully understand the impact that we're having on a life. But her name is Claire Levin, and she was quite magical and will always be magical to me. Well, many years later, I met her and I asked her, "Why did you do that?" Because she could have kept walking. She didn't have to stop and give me this gift, which she did many years later. And she, who had endured a fair amount of difficulty in her life, said that she was, in essence, in giving me books, she was doing something that her mother told her to do, which was to give from where you are with whatever you have. And all she had to give me were books that her three sons no longer read. A lighthouse. The second lighthouse was the director of a college access program. Her name is Ruby Doughton. I first met Ruby when I was a little boy in the middle of a spelling bee, an academic competition. And I just remember the way that she looked at me. And Ruby poured a lot of her wisdom into me. She was the reason that I actually wound up getting to college. She was the person for whom I worked first when I left college. And Ruby, humble, faith abiding, and really loved young people. Just extraordinary person. She was and still is a lighthouse for me. The third lighthouse was a person who worked for Ruby. His name is John Sykes. And John was a counselor and a teacher in this program working for Ruby. And I overheard him talking about me one time to another counselor. And he said, I don't have any children, but if I did, I would love for them to be a lot like Steve. Now, he did not know that I heard him say that. So when I find myself trying to escape this foster home that I'm in, and my social worker, who is a very good man and was really trying to help me, asks me after a day of making calls if I knew anybody that I could go stay with. And I didn't, to be honest. I had no memory of family. And I couldn't go back to the foster home that I had just escaped from. And so I was really perplexed. What and who do I go to? I just wanted to get to college. And all I could think of was that man, John Sykes, and that comment that he made. And so I told my social worker, well, there's this counselor who works for Ruby Dot, and I think that he likes me, is what I said. Well, he was supposed to be on vacation, but he wasn't on vacation. He was actually in his office working. It was 3 days after Christmas, so he actually should not have been there, but he was there. He takes the call, and I went to live with him that night. And it would be for my last year of school before I went off to university. And so, I think about these three different lives and the effect and the impact that they have, how extraordinary their touch is and remains to me. I've gone on to do a lot of things in my professional life. Today, I am the Chief Human Resource Officer for a great company called Work Human. And what we focus on is gratitude. When I was writing my book, I was trying to tell the story of how every single one of us can touch and impact a life with the small things. In my case, it was somebody who brought me books, and somebody who told me that I could get to university, and somebody who gave me shelter in the middle of the holidays. All of us have that. All of us have that power, though. We can do the smallest of things. We can use somebody's name when we're talking to them. In the midst of this global pandemic, it's the small things, the small gestures that quite literally can change the arc of somebody's life. It absolutely changed the arc of mine. How things have turned out for me has a lot to do with those lighthouses. My role at Work Human as Chief Human Resource Officer, I can tell you about the global impact. We've studied gratitude across the world and know that there's a certain universality to gratitude. We know that people are 2 times more likely to show trust. They stay more engaged if there's emotional, physical, social benefits to gratitude. Imagine if you wake up every single day trying to figure out how it is that you can actually touch and impact a life with the small things. Any of us can do that. And so perhaps in many ways, that's quite literally the personification of a lighthouse. There are 15 or so of them in Germany. And if you really think about what a lighthouse is, it really, in an ironic way, has no business being where it is. The sea is a raging world with fierce winds, and yet the lighthouse stands this incredibly tall structure. You never see a name on a lighthouse because as soon as you see it, you know exactly what it is. It really has 2 purposes. It's there to warn you of danger, and it also can direct your path when you find yourself in difficulty. The most powerful lighthouses in the world are really the human ones, those who touch and impact our life, who steer us to safety, who see in us not circumstances, but possibilities. And we will thrive in this program in many ways is an example of a lighthouse. There are those of you who are listening to this program and to those many speakers who are coming, and you're going to take something away from one of the speakers, if not several of them, something that you're hearing that will perhaps shape and change the way that you see the world. My humble responsibility here is to perhaps show what happens when the power of gratitude gets directed on a single life. I have been happily married to my wife, Tanya, of the last 23 years. I said earlier, we're the proud parents of 3 teenagers, Quinn, Vaughn, and Kennedy. And so this inherited cycle that I found myself in, it was broken largely because of gratitude. So when you wake up tomorrow and as you go into this week, think again about the power of gratitude and remember the lighthouses in your life. Drop them a note, give them a call, and tell them thank you for being a lighthouse to you.